Okay. You can have a meaning 10 people, 11.
Excellent. And we see, I believe, we have another person joining, which is beautiful. So, chapter 20, we're coming towards the end of chapter 9, the book of Shoftim, of Judges. And really, this is a continuation of the story of chapter 19. I was just going to quickly sum it up for everyone, so we know what we were talking about. What happened was, it was a story between a husband and a wife. A wife, it was actually concubine, and in halachic terms, in Jewish law, concubine and a wife have a little bit of a different role. But regardless, they're still a person, and a tragedy took place where the concubine goes to her father's place. And when she goes back home, she leaves her husband. Her husband goes and tries to win her over. As he travels to his father-in-law's home, his father-in-law, tells him to stay around, until finally the husband decides, hey, that's it. I want to go back. I want to go back home, and I want to take my wife with me. And he travels along the way. He comes to a place where, when he stays in this overnight, he's invited by a person. And during the evening, the people of the place come out and demand to know who has come during the night to stay in this town. And of course, the host is telling his friends, or telling the people around, please leave my guests alone. And they persist. And what ends up happening is, the host offers his daughters up, to which they say no. And then what ends up happening is, the husband ends up throwing his wife out, so that those who have come can actually ended up raping her and defiling her, to the point where she was so faint that the husband just throws her on the donkey. When he leaves, he totally forgot about her, because he went to sleep, and in the morning he sees her fainted on the doorway, and he just, like a sack of potatoes, he just throws her on the donkey, and she dies along the way. And if you remember, he chops her up into 12 pieces, and he sends her throughout the land. And this is really where we are. It's absolutely a gruesome story. But again, as I mentioned, the story is here to conclude the chapters of Shoftim, just to kind of paint for us the level of morality that was taking place during that time. Things that happened that are unspeakable, as I see everybody cringe. So let's continue.
Seems like nothing's changed.
And exactly, we mentioned that it's, that it seems like, as we cringe and we say, these are things that can only happen, in days when we were not advanced, in barbaric times. And less than a month ago, the same horrible, unspeakable acts took place. But not only that took place, and they were glorifying and filming it and reveling in their acts of glory. It's absolutely disgusting. But let's continue with chapter 20 in the book of Shoftim. Vaytzu kol bnei Israel. Thereupon all the Israelites left their houses. Vatikahel hayda ki'ish echad. The entire congregation, the entire nation, gathered as one person. And we had Philip ask, what does it mean ki'ish echad? How do they gather as one person? I'll answer it shortly. Lemidan ve'ad be'er sheva. They were encamped from Dan until Be'er Sheva, ve'eretz hagilad, and all the way forth to in the land of Gilad. El Adonai ha-mitzpah. They marched forth, and the community assembled as one before God at Mitzpah. So what is assembled as one? There are a couple explanations. First of all, they had the same resolve. In other words, now they witnessed, after receiving the pieces of the body, they wanted to know, wanted to inquire, what is this crime? What happened here? They're not just going to let this go. So, in other words, the entire nation is gathering in one place to find out, to bring justice to this crime. Also, Keish Echad, our sages tell us that they actually, for the first time again, camped as they camped in the desert. So each one came forth according to his tribe, but they all gathered with one mission. With one priority. They were all resolute and united to find out for only one cause what happened with this lady. Vaytyatzvu pinot kol ha'am, kol shiftei Israel b'kahal am ha'elohim, 400,000 ish ragli sholef charev. All the leaders of the people, all the tribes of Israel presented themselves in an assembly of God. They numbered 400,000 fighters. They had swords. In other words, they were fighters. These were fighters on foot. So 400,000 foot soldiers, nobody on horse. They literally walked down. Vaishmeu bnei Binyamin, ke'alu bnei Yisrael hamitzpah. The Benjaminites heard that the Israelites had come up to Mitzpah. Now, I remind everybody that this crime took place in the Shevet of Benjamin. Okay, so that's where it took. So now, the Benjaminites heard that the entire nation of Israel went up to Mitzpah, because Mitzpah at that point was their capital, so to speak. That is where they went. That is where the Mishkan was. So they went to ask God. They wanted to get some clarifications. Vayamru bnei Israel, and the Israelites said, Dabru echani tahrazo. Tell us, let us figure out, how did this evil thing happen? Vayan haish halevi. If you remember the husband, this is referring to the husband. Vayan haish halevi, the Levite, ish haisha hanirtzacha, the husband of the woman that was murdered. Vayumar, and he said, Hagivata asher levinyamin, bati ani ufilagshi lalun. And he's recounting the story. He says, I arrived at the place called Givata. I got there, and I myself and my concubine, and we were looking for a place to sleep. And we found a place. Vayikumu alai balei hagiva. Suddenly, the citizens of the place of Gibeah, they all came out to harm me. Vayasobu alai, and they gathered and they encircled me. At habayit laila, and they surrounded the house at night. Oti dimula harog, and they meant, or they gave off the vibes that they were going to come and kill me. Vet pilakshi inu vatamot, and not only that, but they abused my concubine until she died. So it seems like he's telling the truth, but he's forgetting one thing. Do you remember what happened actually? What actually happened?
Well, he isn't the direct culprit, but he's the indirect culprit, because he certainly didn't discourage. Put it that
No,
way.
he threw the wife. He's
Exactly, Irene. He's
Right,
the
we
one
threw
who
her on
actually,
the-
he voluntarily threw out his wife.
He threw
to
the
be-
wife. He offered her
and
to
then
the
what happened
Yeah.
happened. So yes, he's
But he
telling the
didn't
truth,
actually
so-
cut her up.
Yeah, he later on
He's
cut
the
her up.
horrible.
So
Did he
in other
cut
words,
her up
he's-
to try and get rid of the body? But he
so
didn't?
no.
Wait.
We'll find out shortly. You'll see the next pasuk, number 6. So in other words, he's leaving out a very key important information here, detail, that it was he who actually threw out or gave up his wife
That
to
part,
them.
yeah.
Yes, they surrounded. Yes, they were there to threaten, but he offered his wife. Just he chucked her out the door, and what they did is what they did. But he's saying that they were coming to kill, and they took his wife.
No, clearly he's not an innocent party.
He definitely is not.
Definitely
And-
grounds for divorce.
Yeah,
But more than that.
yeah.
No,
Va'ochez
He's an
befilakshi.
accessory. He's an accessory, yeah.
Right. And so he says that, let's go back again. So all the citizens of this place, they encircled my house, they threatened to kill me, and they took hold of my concubine, and they abused her, and she died. And so va'ochez befilakshi, I took hold of my concubine, va'an techeha, and I cut her into pieces,
So
Vashlacha bechol tzedei nachalat Israel, and I sent them to every part or every territory, every corner, that which has been inherited by Israel.
so effectively he's a
Kiasu
co-murderer.
zima, right? Hold on one second. Kiasu zima unvala beIsrael. I wanted to advise everyone of the outrageous act that they had committed. So in other words, he's saying, he's not denying cutting her up, but he's denying having anything to do with her murder. He's saying this is what came up to me, and actually why I cut it up was to let everybody know. Of course, they didn't have, texting or pictures or email. This was the way that I can make a stink in terms of make it really stand out by sending a piece to so that everybody will ask what's going on. And I made a point, and I was right, because everybody's here. So it obviously made enough of an impression that the entire nation has gathered to find out what happens, but he's absolving himself from any wrong.
Nice.
So now all of the crowd here, the Israelites, let's produce an action. What should we do? In other words, how do we resolve this issue? So now he's kind of saying, I'm with you. I want a resolution. How do we punish the perpetrators? Vayakam kol ha'am ke'ish echad lemor, and the entire nation rose up as one voice, and they were said, Lo nelech ish le'ahalo. We are not returning back to our homes. Velo nasur ish leveito. We are not going back to our. It's a double entendre. We will not go back to our homes. It's a fortitude. It's a bold. They're making a very bold, clear statement. We're not going home. We're not returning back to where we are from. Okay. In other words, we have a mission here to do. Vata, and now ze hadavar asher naseh legiv'ah. This is what we shall do to that place, to Giv'ah, aleha begoral, against it. We will wage war against it according to that which they have done. Okay, so now they're saying, what is the remedy? The remedy is to go forth and to avenge, to wage war against that city which is corrupt. And now
But
they
it's
are
not, Yosi,
yes,
but they're
yes.
not giving a remedy with respect to him at this point.
He's how do you call it? He is right. He told him the story, but
And
obviously
they
obviously
accepted his story.
Yeah.
but he left a very, very important detail out. Okay, but let's continue. Let's continue going on, and we will see how it continues. So
Is that the fact that he didn't fight it at all for her? That was his, what he left out?
no, he left out the fact that he was the one who actually threw her out the door. He's the one who actually gave her up. They did not just, yes, they surrounded the house. Yes, they threatened, but he willingly gave up his wife and said, here, do what, in order to save my life, or for whatever reason, just appease them, just get off our back. Here's my wife. Maybe it's a smoke screen in terms of, obviously they were busy doing what they needed to do and they couldn't fulfill that which they did, but he was an accessory. He's the one who actually threw her out.
But the fact that he's, sorry, Art, go ahead.
Yes,
okay,
Michael.
I want to know what's happened here.
Michael?
No, I was just going to say the fact that he acknowledged chopping her up in pieces, that would seem to merit punishment unto itself. Even that
he was absolving himself by saying, the reason why I sent it was to make a point to let everybody, it was an alarm.
They justified it.
Yeah.
He justified it saying it's an alarm. I wanted to get everybody's attention of what happened.
They bought it and they accepted it. No, let's read it. I want to know what happened.
Yes. Okay. So in other words, he kind of justified, and he's saying, I'm right. Look, you're all gathered here. Obviously, it had an effect on you. That is why I did it, in order that we get a resolve. And how do we punish these perpetrators? So he's kind of saying, I was actually smart what I did, as hard and gruesome as it was. I did it so that we could all come together. Otherwise, it would be just a story. Maybe it's not as bad, etc. But he made a point, and he really highlighted how gruesome the act against his concubine was. Forget about right now the cutting up in terms of as its own separate. He was justifying himself by trying to make sure that he gets people's attention, the entire nation's attention. So they say we're going to go up against Giv'ah, and we will wage war against it. And now they're going to describe how they are going to gather an army. Velakachnu asara anashim leme'ah lechol shiftei Israel. So we will take from all the tribes of Israel 10 for every 100. So what is that called? What is in math? What is that?
10%.
Uh, 10%,
10%,
exactly. And it falls. Ume'a la'elef ve'elef lervava.
It's a very
In other words, it's
1,000.
10. We'll take 10%. Okay,
Yeah.
100 from every 1,000 and 1,000 for every 10,000. So they're giving us the formula. And I guess in those days they didn't really the idea of percent didn't exist yet. But they're giving us the proportion of the army. In other words, 10% of each tribe is going to come and present themselves to one front. Okay.
So good to-
And of course we will have to take provisions and supplies to prepare for their trip all the way to Geva, which is in the tribe of Benjamin. For we have a mission to avenge the outrage which has been committed in Israel. Vayasef kol ish Yisrael el ha'ir keish echad chaverim. So that is what happened. All the Israel's forces united as one, massed against the town. So now we move, so to speak. We see them all marching towards Geva. Okay, so and as you see, we have this little pay. I want to show you.
Yeah.
Here we have.
End of thought.
Do you see this here?
Yeah. Means the end of the thought.
So that is punctuation for patuach.
Open.
The rest of this of how do you call it? The rest of the
Paragraph.
that line when you write it,
Yeah.
when a scribe writes it, and he comes to that word echad chaverim, the remainder of the line is empty. remains open. No words are written. In other words, it's a hard enter. That's
Right.
the end. That's the end of act number 1, or the first section in this chapter. And now we're going to go into the next part of the chapter.
Okay.
Number 12. Vaishlechu shiftei Israel anashim bechol shiftei Binyamin lemor. And so the first thing that they did was the tribes of Israel all sent out agents throughout the whole land of Binyamin, throughout their inheritance, with the following message. Mahara azot asher nita bachem. What is this evil thing? What the heck is going on? What is this evil thing that has happened amongst you? We want an explanation of what is going on. Vata, and now this is what we are putting conditions on. Tnu et ha'anashim b'nei Velial asher bagiva unmitem. What we want is we want you to give forth all the perpetrators who committed the crime, and we will put them to death. That is their penalty. V'nav'ara ra'am Yisrael, in order for us to stamp, to burn out, to eliminate the wickedness from Israel. However, v'lo avu b'nei Binyamin lishmoa b'kol achehem b'nei Yisrael. However, b'nei Binyamin had no intention, and they did not yield to their demands, nor did they want to listen to what they were asking from Bnei Binyamin. So, vayasfu Bnei Binyamin min harim hagivata latzet lamilchama in Bnei Israel. We're going to have the first civil war, or at least what looks like a civil war within Israel. And during that time, they refused the demands of the entire nation. And what they did was they gathered from all their towns warriors and people able to fight, and they also came to Givata with the intention of waging war against the Israelites. And now the numbers of how many were they able to gather? Esrim veshisha elef.
26,000.
There were 26,000 fighters from all the ones who lived, the inhabitants of Giv'ah. Amongst them, there were 700 elite troops. And we're going to find out what exactly. So 26,000, 7,700 as well were elite forces. Mikol ha'am hazeh, of these 700 of the best troops, iter yad yemino, were left-handed.
Good.
Kol ze kolea ba'even el hasha'ara velo yachati. And here it's a very interesting one. They're giving us a description here of these 700. What were they? Why were they elite? They were left-handed, and everyone could sling a stone at a hair and not miss. In other words, why were they elite? These were sharp shooters. Now, I turn your attention to this word. Now, in our translation, it's
Not to miss.
velo yachati. In other words, they are marksmen, and even if they aim at a hair, el hasa'ara velo yachati, they can aim as far a small target as such as a hair, and they will not miss. But what does yachati mean? What word does that come from?
It's not from Yachad. From Yachad? No.
No, comes from the word sin, chet, right?
Okay. Oh, I believe from your. Oh, yeah.
You see,
Yeah.
velo yachati. They're kind of, the text kind of is saying, no, we're not sinners. They're absolving themselves. That's why they're coming up to fight. It's a play on words, velo yachati, and they're kind of, if you want to say, the text is being alludes to the fact that they're denying any wrongdoing. Okay, so they're using, it's a double entendre word. One is that that their aim is so good. One is velo yachati, we have no sinners. And once again, we see that hey, that's another section, that's another act, so to speak, within the chapter. Now we go into another next idea. So Veish Yisrael hitpakdu levad mi Binyamin. Israel's side, other than Benjamin, are 400,000 ish olev charev. There were 400,000 fighters, every one of them a warrior. So in other words, it was 400,000 fighters versus just under 27,000. So obviously quite outnumbered. All right. Vayakumu vayalu veit el vaish alu velohim. So before they broke out in war, they proceeded to Bethel. And the reason why is they wanted to get to inquire God. They wanted to get direction before there was going to be a war. What is there to do? They go up and seek advice of God. They go up to Bethel and inquire. And then the Israelites asked, Mi yalilanu vatchila lemilchama im Binyamin. And so they asked, who shall be the first representatives? Who shall be the first ones to go to war? Vayomer Adonai Yehuda vatchila. And God replies, Judah should be the first representative to go before. Vayakumu vnei Israel baboker. So the Israelites arose in the morning. Vayachanu al hagiva, and they encamped against Giva. Vayetze ish Israel lamilchama im Binyamin. Vayarchu itam ish Israel milchama et hagiva. And so there, Israel took the field, and the war begins. This is unfortunately the first civil war that is within the Israelites, and they break into war. What happens? Vayitzu vnei Binyamin min hagivah, but the Benjaminites issued forth from Givah. Vayashchitu vnei Israel bayemahu shnaim ve'esrim elef ish arza. And that day, the army of Israel, so in other words, everybody except Benjamin, they wiped up 22,000, okay, down of the Israelites. Vayitchazek ha'am ish Yisrael vayosifu la'aroch milchama. However, once more again, now the army, Israel's force, rallied again. B'makom asher achu sham bayom harishon. They went back again to the same place that they had another battle, right? The battle, and once more they wage war. Vayalu vnei Yisrael vayifku lifnei Adonai. For the Israelites had gone up that evening and wept before God until the morning until evening. Vayishalu barnai lemor, and they asked God, "How sif lagesh lemicha? Should we go back again? Im bnei Binyamin achi?" Vayomer Adonai alu elav. God said yes. So this is what happened after they lost 22,000 men. Okay, so it's actually the pasuk is in reverse order. So what happened was the first day the Israelites lose 22,000 men. They go and cry out before God and say, "Is this a war that we should be waging?" And God said, "Yes, go back and fight." And so they go back again, 22. So it's kind of like they're giving an explanation after the fact that it happens. And again, we have a little pay, and this is right now we're at the second day of the war. Vaykaruvu v'nei Israel el Binyamin bayom hasheni, and the Israelites advanced against the Benjaminites on the second day. Vaytze Binyamin likratam min hagiv'ah bayom hasheni, vayshchitu bivnei Israel ad 18,000 ish arza, kol ele sholfei charev. What happened? The Benjaminites came out forth from Giv'ah against them the second day, and once again they struck 18,000 more of the Israelites, all of them fighters. What do you mean by fighters? Usually means these were strong of the lot. Usually these are the ones that go out first. Okay? So if you can see it, it's hand-to-hand combat. It's person to person. Usually the stronger ones are in the front and the weaker ones are in the back. And they killed obviously the ones that were the stronger of 18,000 strong men.
18 and 26. Well, okay.
Again, so we have 22,000 on the first day, 18,000 on the second day, for a total of 40,000, right? My math is correct. 40,000 in 2 days. Vayalu, again, Vayalu kol bnei Israel v'chol ha'am vayavo Beitel. Once again, after another great defeat, they go back up to Beitel. Vayifku, they cry, Vayishvu sham lifnei Adonai. And there they sat and they pleaded before God. Vayatsumu vayomahu ad ha'arev, and they even fasted all the way until the evening. Vayalu alot ushlamim lifnei Adonai, and they presented burnt offerings and offerings of well-being of its whole before God. Vaishalu v'nei Yisrael b'Adonai, and then the Israelites once again inquired of God. V'sham aron brit ha'Elohim, for in Bethel, during those days, the Ark of the Covenant used to remain in Bethel. So there they asked again what to do. Ufinchas ben Elazar ben Aharon omed lefanav b'yamim ha'em. Where do we have this guy? Pinchas. So if you remember, yeah,
he was the
Rafa?
zealot. He was the zealot that killed.
Yes. Zimri ben yes.
Yeah.
So if you remember in there's a parasha where the Midianites come up and they perform lewd acts, and what ends up happening is Pinchas comes up and he stabs one of the perpetrators, who happens to be also a leader, and God blesses Pinchas with shalom, with peace. And if you ever look, actually, it's interesting. The vav is cut in. It's only the letter in the Torah that it's actually cut.
We've talked about it's a dubious piece in a way.
Yes,
it's taken with asterisks, with warnings.
Exactly. So who's actually the Kohen Gadol? Pinchas ben Elazar is the one who is in charge of Aaron. So of the Ark of the Covenant. So this is in the early days. The reason why I want to highlight this to you is to put it into perspective so Pinchas is in the Torah, and now we are in the last chapter of Shoftim. Remember I told you that the last chapters of Shoftim, it's almost kind of backwards. They almost should have been the first chapters of Shoftim to kind of give us an idea of the rowdiness or the lowliness of.
Yosi, this is supposedly the same Pinchas.
It is. It's not. It's not supposedly. It is. It's Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron. It's exactly him.
So as you said, it's way out of chronological sync at this point.
Right.
Yeah.
So what did the God answer? I want to see.
So let's find out. So again, after the second day, they lost another 18,000 men. The Israelites go up to Beit El, where the Ark of the Covenant is, And who's in charge right now? Who's running the temple or the Mishkan at that time? It's Pinchas ben Elazar. And they ask for guidance. And what's the question? Haosif od latzet lamilchama im bnei Binyamin achi im echdal. Shall we again take the field against our kinsmen, the Benjaminites, or shall we forget about it? Vayomer Adonai alu. And the answer that they received is from God is no. Go forth. Ki machar etnenu ve'yadecha. For tomorrow I shall deliver them in your hand. So they're going to go up for a third day. Vayasem Israel orvim al hagivah saviv. And so what they decided was that the Israel army put men in ambush against Gilboa and against Agivah on all the sides. So now they surrounded them and they're going to ambush them. Okay? Vayalu bnei Israel el bnei Binyamin bayom hashlishi vayarchu el hagivah kefam befam. And on the third day, the Israelites again went up against the Benjaminites as they had done the first 2 days, or at least so it seemed, in order to engage them in battle. Vayetzu bnei Binyamin likrat ha'am. And upon seeing the return of the Israelites' army, the Benjaminites went out and dashed out to meet the army. Honteku min ha'ir, and were drawn away from the town. Vayachelu lahakot me'am chalalim kefam befam, and they started actually once again to hit the Israelites as they did beforehand. Bamsilot asher achat ola veit el v'achat givata basadeh kishloshim ish beIsrael. And as before, they started out. The war started to seem as though the Benjaminites were winning. They started out by striking some of the men dead in the open field, some on the road that led to Ola, and one the one that goes towards Bethel. About 30 Israelites. So at the beginning of the war, it looks like Benjamin is continuing their onslaught as they kill 30 men. Vayamru bnei Binyamin, and so bnei Binyamin thought, and they cried out, Nigafim hem lefanenu kevarishona. They are going to be routed before us. We are going to ransack them, just as we have done the first day and the second day. Uvnei Israel amru nanusa un taknuhu min ha'ir el hamesilot. But the Israelites had planned that we will take to fight and draw them away from the town, and we'll have them fight out on the roads. So in other words, that was part of the ambushes, to not fight. Does it sound almost kind of like what's happening now? We're not going to have a fight in the city, in an urban area, in an urban setting. What we do is, let's take it out onto the roads in a different area. V'chol ish Yisrael kamu mimkomo. And now those that have waited in ambush, suddenly all the main body of the fort had moved away from their positions and had drawn up in battle order at Baal Tamar. The Orev Israel megiach mimkomo mima'arei gava. And now the ambush was rushing out from its position, which was in Ma'arei Gava. So they planned this out, that they would ambush, they would draw them out. They recognized that in the city, Binyamin had the upper hand. Now they're drawing them out to a different battlefield. Vayavo mineged lagiv'ah aseret alafim ish bachur mikol Israel. Thus 10,000 of the best troops from all of Israel came to a point south of Giva. And the battle was furious before they realized that disaster was approaching. And we'll find out what the disaster is. Okay, so we have right now another chapter within a chapter, or the idea. Vaygof Adonai Binyamin lifnei Israel. Finally, God routed the Benjaminites before Israel, and that day the Israelites slew 25,100 from the tribe of Benjamin. Kol ele sholef charv, these were elite fighters. Vayir'u v'nei Binyamin ki nakfu, and thus at this point the Benjaminites finally realized that they were that the end is near, that they were routed. Vaytnu ish Yisrael makom leVinyamin. Now Israel had yielded ground to the Benjaminites, for they relied on the ambush that they had laid against Giv'ah. Va'orev hechishu vayivshetu el hagivah vayimshoch ha'orev vayachet kol ha'ir lefi charev. And while there was still engaged, one of the battalions, the ambush battalions, deployed against Giv'ah, while the other ambush advanced and put the entire town to sword. So in other words, they punished the entire town by killing them all. V'hamoed haya leish Yisrael im ha'orev. A time had been agreed upon by Israel's force with those in ambush. Herev lehalutam mas'at he'ashan min ha'ir. They made a sign when the Israelites can return back together and rejoin the other parts of the army. So in other words, the army was split. There was a bigger section fighting against Benjamin, while those that ambushed, some ambushed and fought against the Benjamin, some part of the ambush, if you remember, they encircled the town, remained in the town and wiped out the town. And what was the sign for the Israelites to return, that they were victorious? Was when they saw a huge column of smoke was sent up from the town. In other words, they burned the town as well. So does everybody understand what happened? So there were actually three fronts to the war. Okay, so the Israelites pulled Benjamin into a different area. The ambush, part of the ambush went against Benjamin. Part of the ambush went and remained in the town. Okay, so the three fronts. And once the Israelites were victorious, they knew the sign of victory in the town would be seeing a cloud of smoke.
Yosi,
Yes.
it's Philip. I
Yes.
must have missed the point, but why are the brothers fighting each other, and why is God encouraging Binyamin the tribe of Binyamin to fight with Israel?
So there was a defilement of a lady that took
Oh,
place.
I heard that.
A gruesome defilement, and originally the Israelites wanted and the defilement took place in Giv'ah, which was in the tribe of Benjamin. Originally, the Israelites came up and demanded that all those who perpetrated the sin be handed over, and their punishment would be death. The Benjaminites they refused, and so they're going into battle.
But so many people to die. It seemed to be like really, and the God encouraged. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
That's
And here we have a quick synopsis of what happened. Okay.
But this is all because of the guile, Guile, of one man.
Yeah. Vayafoch ish Yisrael b'milchama, and Israel's force was to turn about in battle. And this is a synopsis of what happened. Uvinyamin hechel lakot chalalim beish Yisrael kishloshim ish. That day, Benjamin had begun out strong by striking dead about 30 men from Israel's force, and they thought, Ki amru ach nigof nigaf hu lefanenu kamilchama rishona. They are being routed before us as in the previous fighting. V'hamaset hechela la'alot min ha'ir amud ashan. But when the column, the pillar of smoke, began to rise from the city, Vayifen Binyamin acharav, the Benjaminites looked and what they saw behind them, Vehine Allah Khalil ha'ir hashamayma, and there was the whole town going up in smoke. So they also understood their fate, what was going to happen. Ve'ish Yisrael hafach, Vahibael ish Binyamin kira'ah kinaga alav hara'ah. Now Israel's force turned around, the fortunes turned around as the Israelites began to rout the Benjaminites, and Benjamin's force was thrown into panic, for they realized that disaster had overtaken them, or actually had reached up with them. In other words, their lot for what they had committed had caught up to them. Vaifnu lifnei ish Yisrael el derech hamidbar. They retreated before Israel's force along the road to the wilderness. V'amilchama hidbikathu, where the fighting caught up with them. Vasher meharim mashchitim oto betocho. Meanwhile, all those whoever returned or whoever was caught in the city, they were put, or they were massacred. They were put to death.
Sounds like Sodom and Gomorrah.
It's interesting you said it, because it's exactly what the chapter 19, the words were exactly, if you remember the last week we were reading it, it's exactly almost verbatim to what happened in the parallels are almost incredible. Even the words that were used of surrounding the door, what they offered them, the daughters, just like Lot offers his daughters up, and of course the idea of breaking the door down. It's exactly verbatim almost to what happens in Sodom and Gomorrah, which we actually read about in this week's parsha. Hitru et Binyamin hirdifuhu. They encircled the Benjaminites. V'hirdifuhu, they pursued them. Menucha hidrichuhu, and trod them down from Menucha to a point opposite Gibat on the east. So in other words, they finally cornered even those that finally escaped. Vayplu Binyamin 18,000 ish et kol ele anshe chayil. That day, 18,000 of the Benjaminites fell, all of them anshe chayil. Here they say brave men, but these are men of war. Vayfnu vayanusu hamidbara el sela harimon. This is again an ongoing right now onslaught. Vayfnu vayanusu hamidbara el sela harimon. They turned and fled to the wilderness, to the rock of Rimmon. By the way, it's interesting, rock of Rimmon. I'm seeing this, and there is, and you can Google this, by the way, just north of Stamford, Connecticut, there is a golf course called Rock Rimmon. I kid you not. One word, rock, R-I-M, I think R-I-M-M-O-N. There was just I was just there for one of our members received an honor for his work with the Israeli Cancer Research Fund. So, but it was at and I see it, Rock of Rimmon. It was called Rock Rimmon. It was the golf course, and it was just it's interesting. So anyway, the Benjaminites, they fled to the wilderness of Rock Rimmon, but the Israelites picked off another 5,000 on the roads, and continuing in hot pursuit of them up to Gidon, where they slew 2,000 more. Vahi kol hanoflimi binyamin. In total, so this was kind of a breakdown of how we got to the 25,000. Vahi kol hanoflimi binyamin 25,000 ish sholef cherev bayom hahu et kol ele anshe chayil. In total, there were 25,000 that were slain that day. All of them brave men. I think it's more they were men of war.
Yes. Yosi?
Yes.
Any way you look at it, slaying 25,000 people in one day is highly improbable. What do the numbers signify?
It's a great point. So some have it. You can read it the simple how do you call it? The simple explanation is 25,000, as they say. You know, they engage in war. That's what it was. You also have to understand it was an army of 400,000 men that at first were weakened. But you're looking at about 300. The number is actually quite staggering. See if you can make the number. The number was about 360,000. After the 40,000 that were died.
Right.
Does that number ring out loud? 360?
Yeah.
That is the number right now that is amassed, or they say
On the borders.
that is called up right now in Israel. It's amazing. That is what that's the number. So it's not unrealistic if they're going to battle on that day, that those numbers could happen. It's not like, you know, sending one bomb at a time, and, you know, you're getting, these are actually people who are engaged in battle. There was certainly more of, and I don't say it in terms of gentleman warfare, but there was kind of an honor system where, you know, you went up, and those that fought head to head, and the stronger, bigger, whatever army, the more fortitude, ended up the one on top. But there wasn't this, you know, civilian, or you know, we have right now, you know, Nasrallah is sitting there in Qatar in his, you know, whatever $10 million unit, sitting in his beautiful suits, and with a green frame of Jerusalem behind him, because it's so important for him. So he's sitting there giving orders, knowing, you know, because he's too big of a chicken to be actually sitting in some bunker in in Gaza. And this is, you know, he's such a what a war hero, you know, like sitting in there where he doesn't even go see the battlefield, just sends them out. Or, you know, Iranian proxies, basically they're you know, they're going to be at least Hamas and Hezbollah are doing all their, while the Iranians are sitting home doing this, you know, while big deal. There's no threat to them. It's and they don't realize that they're just proxies, they're just numbers, and they're dying for somebody else, whatever their ideology. By the way, it's a very interesting, if you know a little bit about Islam, about the two different sects, and why Saudi Arabia, and this is all within, actually, and it's an ideological war that is happening right now between the two factions within Islam. And that is why also Iran is making sure that they're trying to, one of them, I forget who's a Sunni and Shiites, but I believe how do you call it? The Iranians are Shiites.
The Iranians are Shiites and the Saudis are Sunnis.
Sunnis. The Sunnis actually believe that Israel, even in their version of the Quran, Israel is the owners of the land of Israel. And they need to be there in order for their Messiah to come. Where the Shiites believe that anybody who is not a Muslim is an infidel, and must, in order for Mashiach, for them to come, has to be wiped out. And so within them, if you look at it in terms of the ideological war, the Saudis are routing for Israel, obviously, and that is where the balance of shift can be immense. And I know I'm simplifying it, but that is kind of what's happening in terms of the two factions within Islam. But it's a very interesting like time. So, and eventually, by the way, both of these factions will fight each other. So you'll see them, the Shiites and the Sunnis despise each other. That is also why, if you notice, why, you know, you're wondering how come, you know, nobody wants to help the Gazans. These guys, you know, Egypt doesn't want them, and the Saudis don't want to help them. And at the end of the day, if you're not within the same faction, they're really, I shouldn't say hate it, but they hate each other. They really despise each other. They want to wipe each other out, because one will denounce, or the reality will denounce the other one's view. Or what they believe in, or how at the end of the day, you know, their Mashiach ends up coming. So, anyways, it's rather interesting to know that. But let's continue. But that's actually, Peter,
Yosi,
really good. Yes,
it's Philip. Can I ask a question, please?
Absolutely.
So, what I understand is about 400,000 warriors from two tribes, right?
No, not from two tribes. So the entire 400 came from the entire nation of Israel, except for Benjamin. So everybody except Benjamin.
Oh, it was all of the tribes?
All 11 except Benjamin.
Yes.
Oh, that I didn't understand. So it's all of the tribes against Benjamin.
You got it. Exactly. That's why it was so lopsided, the numbers.
Oh, okay. And then I understand, because I was trying to relate the number of fighters to the total population of the combatants. So then I guess the 300,000 is reasonable as a proportion. How many Jews were there at that time in all of the tribes?
If I'm not mistaken, we're looking at what was the count was
620,000 or so.
no, I think we're looking at about 3 or 4 million in total.
Oh, okay. So then that's
The fighters were 1/10 of the population.
Right. So roughly, yeah. Of each tribe's population. So roughly about 3 to 4 million. Exactly. Something of that magnitude.
No, that's what I'm thinking. The census was of fighters, yeah.
Yeah. So we're looking at that, and obviously, as Michael, as you said, 11 versus 1, even in numbers. But Benjamin were valiant fighters. Okay. So let's continue back on 47. Vaifnu vainuso hamidbara, and there were Benjaminites who fled out to the wilderness. El Sela Harimon, to the place named the Rock of Rimon. 600 ish, 600 vaishvu besel Rimon arba chodashim, and they remained there hidden for 4 months. Veish Israel shavu al bnei Binyamin vayakum lefi cherv. Israel's forces, meanwhile, turned back to the rest of the Benjaminites and put them to the sword. Meir metom ad behema. They put everyone, town, people, cattle, everything that remained. V'gam kol ha'arim hanimtzaot shilchu va'esh. Finally, they set fire to all the towns that were left. And that was our first civil war that is recounted in our history. And all I read this, and I don't know about you, I'm like, how does he get away with it? Like, why? Obviously, there was no, we know as the fly on the wall, seeing it from being the reader and being privileged to the, being privileged to know how he was an accessory, and I'm talking about the husband, the Levite. Doesn't say that he necessarily was didn't come out unscathed, but there's no real mention of until now of what happened to this man, to this husband, who certainly was not only negligent, but he was the one who put her in harm's way. I guess if you want to look at the big picture, they were going to do that anyway. So he kind of was an accessory. The only one answer that I have is he was he learned from his host who offered his 2 daughters. So he said, hey, you know what? If these people live here, and here you have the host who asked us to come in to host us. And in those days, by the way, and they still have this this value. If you actually go to place, by and large, if anybody opens up their home to you in the Middle East, it's, and I'm not talking about when there's hatred or God forbid, they do it in order to harm you. But if there's good intention, in the olden days, if somebody opened his house to you, he was responsible for you. So here you have a host who takes them in, and by taking them in, what he basically tells them is, you're going to be safe. You're under my care now. And being under his care, once they were threatened, the first thing he does is offers his daughters to those who are making the threats. So the husband kind of, I think, sees, oh, I guess this is the normal thing here. They basically want a little bit of a schmearing. How are you gonna make them happy? What do they get out of the deal? And the way that they do is they get their sexual fantasies, whatever it is. That's how they are appeased, in terms of that is the norm of that place. But even then, it just doesn't sit well with me in terms of the whole thing of he doesn't try to resuscitate her. He just throws her on the back of the camel. And, when she dies, it was, obviously we have to understand the entire story as well. He was maybe his anger again for her leaving him. And if you remember that she actually also, while she left, she was still married to him, but she also committed improper acts. So there's a bunch of different things at play. But by and large, the whole idea of this story is not to nitpick of who's right and wrong. It was just to give us the foundation or the idea, the background, so to speak, the noise that is happening, the way the Israelites are. They don't really have any leadership in terms of as a nation that is growing together, that has just moved and inherited a land. They still don't have a unified way of thinking. It's only kind of when they're faced with a tragedy or some kind of a calamity that they actually unify. And I don't know if you know. And again, this almost speaks to what happened literally at the beginning of October. You know,
Yes.
the Israel was never splintered as it was for the last 10 months or 11 months until something tragic happens and suddenly they're boom, we're together, which is awful, but the story rings. There's so many similarities that it's almost eerie. Any questions, any comments by anyone?
Very up.
Yeah, very eerie, but a long chapter, very interesting. We will continue. We will continue, God willing. I just want to let everybody know that I'm not here next week. We are off. I will send a note again to everyone. I know that we have some new faces, which is great to see some new people joining us. Please register, because I'm going to also send out a reminder to remind everyone that we will not have a lesson next week. And I'll remind everyone the following week that we restart. So we only have a couple of chapters left. I do want you to think of the following. It's long coming, but I do want to have a siyum. I want to have a little bit.
We've talked about that.
Yeah, I would very much like to have a little get together if that is what most of the class would want. I don't want to just do it and one or two people show up and not. But I would love it if we can get together, see each other in person, and then continue after that the week after. So think. Let me know if you are up to having a little get together. It's also part of the beauty of when we finish, chapters. We've finished a couple of books already. We've done all the haftarot as well. I think it's time for us all at least to see each other in person and then continue our learning journey.
So
Would you
when-
want to do it in the evening? In the morning,
But
in the
which
afternoon?
day you planned it, and we would meet in shul, in Shar?
We would meet
there.
at the Shar. We would meet at
Yeah.
the Shar.
There is plenty of places there,
Yeah,
Rose.
that's
But
and we
during
can
the
even
time,
start.
during that class time, during that Monday when you teach.
We can either doing it a Monday if it's easier to meet a bit earlier in an afternoon. Don't forget that the clock changes. I believe it's this week.
Yeah.
So which means davening starts earlier. So even if we can meet at 5 o'clock, 5:30,
Yeah,
6
but
o'clock.
the earlier the
um,
best, because it's
Yeah,
dark.
we can meet a bit earlier, and we can also maybe start the next book in person. So I propose not only do we get together, but we will have a personal learning together, where we can where we crack the next book in person. So that is my suggestion. Is that
What?
is that what would be easier around, let's say, 6 o'clock?
Yeah, but what date you talking? Which, like when, end of November? What's the latest?
It would be most likely mid-November, mid to the third week of
On a
November.
Monday after services you're talking about, like in the afternoon?
Yeah,
What
5:30,
time is
6 o'clock.
services?
Services
Well, we're
will-
going to go back to 420 after this week.
Exactly. Services will be around 4:20, 4:10. Don't forget about this. Don't worry about the services as much as I want to kind of get an idea of I think 7 will be late, especially it gets dark, and I understand in terms of the difficulties to travel, especially if weather is inclement. But is that something that we should pursue? Maybe like around 5:30, 5:36 one
So
evening.
you choose the date and you tell us in 2 weeks. You will tell us in 2 weeks.
Yes, in 2 weeks. So perfect. So when we rejoin, so let me just tell you right now, God willing, as I mentioned, next week is the 6th, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So when we pick up again on the 13th, God willing. I will propose a date.
Yeah, but it has
Okay.
I'm leaving on 6th of December, so it has to
Okay,
be.
no, we want to do we want to do before that. But don't forget, Irene, even if you're going down south,
Yeah.
you can always join us on Zoom too. So that'd be great.
Yeah, and Yossi, it goes without saying that if I'm there, it's only going to be if it's the middle of the week,
No,
would only be by Zoom anyway. You
of
understand?
course,
Yeah.
I know. And if we do
So-
if we do a lesson, Michael, I will try to arrange, even if we do it in person, I will try to arrange the ability for those who can't join us to join us through Zoom as well.
Or at the very least, if you can't do that, to tape it. to
You
record
see,
it.
I'm very disturbed by all that story. Sorry to say. It seems to me there was not enough reason to kill so many people and to have such a horrible, horrible war. There was not enough reason, really. So how do you, and God encourages, and God says, go and kill and go and kill. I mean, it's like, doesn't
This, but I agree with you. And in this particular case, the one person who should have probably, if anyone had to be killed, was the man who threw his wife out and
Yeah.
let
right,
him
who threw the wife to humiliate her.
to the wolves.
Nice and
He
cry.
needs
Yeah.
to be killed. That's the only
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. So it's too much for nothing. It's like
It's-
tremendously exaggerated in my book. So can you please calm me down and explain me?
So as I mentioned, and Peter actually had a very good question as well. You know, if you look at logistically, and you
Yeah.
break down the day, don't forget in those days it was very clear. When I say it was gentleman war, they said we will meet here on this field, or we will come out at 8 o'clock. We will fight until lunchtime or dinner time, and we'll see what happens. And that's kind of, you know, that's kind of what it was, you know. It's not when one started again, and it was much less complicated than it is today.
But kill
And
thousands.
if you look at it, if they fought, let's say, a battle for 12 hours, 25,000 people. Peter, you're better in math than I am. 12 hours, you could do it how many minutes there are, 12 times, right, times 60, and you can see, per minute, what does that mean? So here, I'll do it right now. Here,
No, but it's very heavy
60
casualties for what?
here, 60 times
There was
12,
not enough reason for that.
720.
720. So 25 divided by, 25,000 divided by 720, just to give you an idea, is about 35 people a minute.
Yep. And don't forget, they didn't have armaments. This was
Right.
all hand to hand.
Right.
Yeah,
So-
swords and weapon. What do
Right.
you call
So
those?
so it's not unattainable, but it's a huge amount of. I mean, you can just imagine the stench, I don't think we can imagine what 25,000 dead
No, we can.
people. It would be. It's basically when you see the form, when you see the belt center filled with people, all that amount, all those seats would be
Yeah, yeah.
25,000. That's
Yeah.
that's within 12 hours that they can fill each seat. That is the capacity. It's quite astounding. Again, Irene, I think if you want to take it for face value, as I mentioned to Peter, that it was, and it could have happened in terms of 300,000 against 28. They're there face to face. It's not like they're hiding behind buildings and you're trying to get them and you can't get them and you're trying to root them. They are there fighting, and if one side really routs the others, it's definitely possible. But really, the whole point of this story and the last chapters of this book was really to paint for us to get an idea of what society was like, how rowdy it was, how lost they were. Maybe that's the best way to say it. And the same way that you're feeling sick.
Cruel, sadistic, cruel to heal someone. They killing.
Right. It was almost lawless. That it to kind of they almost lost their way. And that is really what the last chapters are trying to lay down, to give us so again, some people say parts of the last chapters happened during the last chapters of Shimshon. Some happen at the beginning, like this story happens pretty much at the beginning of the book of, even before
Shoftim, yeah.
the book of Shoftim happens. It's just to give us kind of like the background noise of why the book of Shoftim happened, in terms of why did God get so angry, where he, you know, he punishes them, and then he finally brings them a shofet to help them out, to get them out of the you know, of their punishment that they're receiving. But now we kind of understand why God's wrath befell upon them, because they were at such at a low, their morals, their values were so not what God intended when they were brought out of Egypt. For somehow they went askew. They lost it, and to the point where, Irene, it makes you sick 100%. There's
Yeah.
not I don't think there's one person here who says, oh, you know, that's what they used to do those days.
No,
It
but
was
it's not
just
justified, not enough
Yeah.
reason for all that. That's what I'm saying.
Frightens me is
Yeah.
how similar it is to what was going on before this war that just started, or didn't just start, but all the spread out fighting between all the different Jews in Israel. That's like similar. And it's, you know,
yeah.
and with their backs turned to, because they weren't paying attention, look what happens.
Yeah. It,
Okay, sorry I asked, but I just
no, it's I think perhaps also part of also stories that are or incidences that are told in the Torah, and there were many incidences that are not told. You know, like, so why specifically is this one important? As well, if you look at all the Nevi'im, if you look at all the prophets, you look at Shoftim, not all of them are enumerated or spoken about, or stories shared about them. And the reason why is the only ones that have a universal meaning are the ones that are actually canonized. So the ones that were particular to that particular time are not really spoken about. So even though the story took place then, it's always something that we can learn all the time. And that's the sad part, as Esther was saying, we mentioned beforehand, that we think how barbaric of them, who would ever do such things? And it still happens today. It's sickening. It's sickening that even today you can read it and say it's not that far from what we saw.
I just saw before coming here, I was watching CNN and a few other stations because I watch almost every one, and they were showing a picture of one of our women being paraded around in a truck after they killed her.
Unfortunately, I believe they found her, and she was killed. I mean, not much different than the story that I mentioned. Exactly what was done to this lady on a donkey back, except you know, he threw her on top of a donkey. Here they were paraded. Oh wow! Look how they can look how 50 men can overpower this helpless woman, and look what they can. Wow, this is really unbelievable. What morals? What glorification? You know, what an accomplishment of a society that they can do this. This we're talking about 3,000 years ago. This we're talking about 30 days ago. You know, it's absolutely sickening.
But there, the enemy did it. Here, the husband was partially.
Yes.
When they said that the town was leveled, that was wonderful. That's what we should do to that Gaza. But not, the world will not let. But you see, they saw the smoke, the town went in smoke, nothing was left. That's wonderful. But how can you do today?
Yeah. Let's listen. This is you know, I don't know if you heard Netanyahu, and I don't want to go off too much on political. That's not the point of the class. But you know what? Just in short, to summarize it, it's the world really has to make a decision whether they want to go with light or darkness. They want to go with just or with the criminals. And this is kind of exactly what this whole story was about.
But the
Um,
world doesn't understand it because yeah, I watched. It was a nice demonstration Sunday. About 1,000 people we were there, right? Now I saw demonstration on STV in London, 100,000 people, 100,000.
Yeah.
And they're not all Palestinians. Most of them is like our neighbors. And I want to ask you, see your advice, and everybody on the panel, because I couldn't sleep with that. I have a feeling, and one of my friends in the building that I live, whom I respect very much, very sophisticated, very intelligent, not Jewish, came to say to me how he understands how difficult, because I have grandchildren and brothers, ta, 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 ta. And then he says, but there are two sides to the story. There are no two sides to the story. How do you answer to that? When somebody, he said, and many people feel it, so I understand, suffer, Israelis suffer, Arabs suffer, there are two sides to the story. How do you answer today? How you say?
so the simple answer is very unfortunately,
Sides to the story. yeah.
unfortunately, what basically in a very sophisticated way, he's actually really exuding anti-Semitism in a very like you said, brilliant way, because it's like saying, you know, for the girl that got raped, you know, there's always two sides of the story. You know, had she not been dressed that way, had she not been as beautiful as she was or as attractive as she was, had she not walked around the way she did, that wouldn't have happened to her. So she actually is the reason, she's the fault. So in other words, you victimize the victim. That's what they're trying to say. And what the world right now, what it's turning out to be is the world is looking at Israel as Israel is the mighty, Israel is the has-it, and the Palestinians are the weak. They're the have-nots. They're the
They
ones
have
who,
no choice. Like they got
No, no.
reason to justify that they were
right. They don't
saying,
have.
"I understand."
So they can't be. You know, we should try to give them as well. That doesn't give them the reason that no matter where you are in life, that doesn't give you the right to behave in a particular manner. And you, the only thing you need to tell him is, if your daughter was raped because she wore a mini skirt, would you ascribe any how do you call it, any fault on her?
They wouldn't understand it because people, you know what, CNN
You
and
know.
all, they never show. They only show Israel, Palestinians, some child here, there.
Okay.
They don't show what we know. They don't show the videos that we see.
It's
None of
it's
them. They don't. So people see that there are two sides. Both suffer. They
Yeah.
both suffer. They have to make a peace. But it's a lot of people, millions of people think like that. Millions.
Yeah.
So what's
I'm
the
just-
answer?
I'm just gonna, if you don't mind, I'm just gonna stop recording.
Yeah.
Hold
So
on.